connected enterprise has an agile and flexible technology infrastructure.
To survive and thrive in the marketplace of the future, businesses will realize that the application of technology at the right time, the right place, will be core to their business model. A digitally enabled technology architecture is the backbone of the connected enterprise.
It harnesses data and analytics. It harnesses digital methods to be responsive to the marketplace, to compete, to win.
When an organization weaves technology all the way through the enterprise, it means they have a fully connected front, middle, and back office.
Relying on all the architecture to hang together that enables that customer experience to come to life.
So they're really a customer-centered organization, regardless of what industry you're in.
A connected enterprise takes an experience centricity by design approach. They really understand from an outside-in perspective the experience that a customer is going to get, that an employee is going to get, as well as their channel partners. It's the experience across the entire enterprise that matters to the end consumer. The idea of experience centricity is at the heart of a connected enterprise.
Connected enterprise creates intentional customer experiences.
Serving as panelists on the second panel session themed Connected Enterprise, orchestrating back-end capabilities to effectively support superior customer journeys on the front end. We have Megan Johnson, fintech researcher, customer journey expert, strategy consultant, UX and design subject matter expert. She is a thought leader, co-founder, strategic advisor, and research guru who helps banks and organizations evolve in the rapidly changing world of digital banking. She supports banks and startups in their quest to deliver truly digital propositions with differentiated customer experience, and has worked with over 30 financial institutions globally. Akeem Lawal, Divisional Chief Executive Officer, Payment Processing, InterSwitch Group. A member of the founding InterSwitch management team, he led technology and operations for the company and was responsible for building, operating, and managing the InterSwitch SuperSwitch infrastructure. Bode Abifarin, Chief Operating Officer, Flutterwave. She is responsible for managing operations and performance across the organization and has experience providing customer advisory, strategy, and business model development for financial institutions, as well as proposing a way to scale, improve efficiency, and profits. Ngozi Chidozie, Partner and Financial Services Strategy and Customer Experience Lead, KPMG, Nigeria. She has in-depth experience supporting clients across the continent in delivering large-scale digital and customer experience transformation projects, many of which are leveraging digital and emerging technologies as platforms for growth. To moderate this panel session is our previous panelist, Tunji Odumumboni. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the panelists and moderator.
Good morning again. As they say, true beauty comes from within. It's in recognition of this that we thought it needed to sort of follow up on what we've been talking on with regards to customer experience and leveraging digital to create differentiated customer experience. We know that from the reviews and assessment we did, we probably see half of the story because it's essentially an outside-in perspective. We also know that to create truly digital experiences for customers, a number of capabilities need to come together at the back, from people to technology to processes. And that's something that needs to work in an orchestrated manner from the front to the mid office to the back office. We do have a rich panel this morning to dive into this topic and sharing leading industry perspective as to what banks and indeed organizations with a retail play needs to do to enable truly digital experiences, taking cognizance of what needs to happen at the back as well as what's happening in the front. I'd like to start this morning with Ngozi. Ngozi, could you please help shed more light into this whole concept of connected enterprise? What does that have to do with the whole topic around creating delightful experiences for customer? What does a connected enterprise look like?
Okay, thanks, Tunji. That's a good question. I mean, connected enterprise is KPMG's customer-centric, enterprise-wide approach to digital transformation. That's actually what it is in its simplest form. Prior to the advent of digital transformation, we've always had business transformation, and it looks at the whole business as a whole. So today we talk digital transformation, and the way KPMG has now positioned to assist numerous clients in that journey is through the connected enterprise approach. And you know, today's customers are better informed, they are very connected, they are more demanding than ever. If you just look at the history of customer experience, they are more demanding than ever. And what we found from our experience is that if you use the connected enterprise approach, and I'll talk a bit about what that is, if you use that approach, customers and clients are more able to yield greater yields on their investments, on the investments that they made. So what is this connected enterprise? Connected enterprise is a methodology or an approach that puts the customer right at the center of everything an organization is doing. So the customer is central. And if you actually listen back from the conversations that we had prior to this, you see that that's the outcome of the survey that was done. So connected enterprise puts the customer right at the center of every decision. So you're connecting and empowering your employees to be able to support the customer promise. You are connecting the organization's front office, the organization's middle office, the organization's back office, so that you are able to fulfill the promise. You are connecting channels and business partners to jointly deliver on the customer promise. And you're also mindful, and you're having an avenue to stay connected to market dynamics and digital signals that you'd find in the larger environment. So there are 5 themes, there are 5 critical lenses that we at KPMG look at connected enterprise. One, which is the most important, is having the customer as central, and then looking at the employees and how you empower them to be able to help deliver the customer promise. Then you look at the factory model, which is your front office, your middle office, your back office, and we call it the factory model, the production line, ensuring that all those are able to assist in meeting the customer experience promise. And the fourth is the channels, the business partners, and last but not the least is the market dynamics and the digital signals. So in a very short synopsis, that's what connected enterprise means.
Thank you very much, Ngozi. I think that provides some level of clarity on the topic. I also think that some of our audience this morning may be thinking, from what you've just said, it appears that we are talking about connected enterprise in the context of a number of things to come together, connected to work together to deliver the customer experience, which you said should be at the center of everything. And I think some will also be thinking, but it appears that we are not saying anything new, because this component that you mentioned, whether it's technology or people or even partners, even in a legacy sort of setup, this component seems to always have been connected anyway. For instance, people run operations, people, technology power processes. So what is new? What are we saying that is different in this time and age about connection that banks need to pay attention to? So what sort of capabilities do they need to sort of bring to bear now that has never been there before? Ngozi.
So So you know, it's interesting that you say that, and you say that people would wonder what's new, and I would have to agree that there isn't anything that's entirely new that you would find. I think what we offer is that it's an optimization of what we've also done as a business or as providers or entities. So it's an optimization of that. That's one leg of the answer. Now, the different thing that I would say when you're looking at this digital transformation is, one, it's really being intentional when you say that the customer is key and the customer is king and the customer is central. It's being intentional. It's actually walking that talk, because many times you go to organizations, they tell you that the customer is king. It's just something that you put on a board and you paste on your board, but there is nothing within the organization that ensures that you actually treat the customer as king. So let me make a couple of points, and I'll now tell you what the capabilities you should then have if you're looking at really truly going on a digital transformation journey using the connected enterprise approach. So the first point is that you really need to be intentional when you say the customer is king and putting the customer as central. The second approach the second thing that connected enterprise as an approach helps you do is that it actually helps you see the elephant as a whole animal. You remember the story of the blind men that saw the elephant, and some of them felt the ears, they felt the legs, they felt the tail, they felt the trunk. And they came away with a different interpretation of what this animal is. So if you use the connected enterprise approach, it shows you all the areas that you should actually look at if you're going on a digital transformation journey. You really have to look at the employees, because they play a big role in being able to deliver. You have to look at your front office, engagement with the customer, the middle office, the production line, the back office, the support functions like HR, finance, technology, and how the role they play. So you have to look at that. You have to look at the channels, how customers actually reach you, be it the apps, be it your mobile or your websites. You have to look at the business partners that you work with. And then you have to look at what's happening in the market, the signals that you find. So what then happens is that you have to have a clear view of the state of your business. And what we do at KPMG is that we use a tool, which is like a very robust digital maturity tool, to assess the state of the business and tell you where perhaps you may be behind and where you may be ahead. And then you work to complete that. So, I mean, the connected enterprise approach in the main helps you focus on the customer and helps you see the big picture. Because when we talk to our clients, many times, intuitively, they know where they want to attack. They may tell you that they're looking at their operations, or they may tell you that, come and help us build this app or design our website, or they may tell you to come and help us with our partners and the interactions with the business. They have different elements, but the connected enterprise as a whole helps you see that whole picture. So that's how I'll answer the first part of your question. Now, there was something else you'd asked. You said, what are the capabilities? So in KPMG, we've actually also thought about that, and we've come up with 8 capabilities, and we've called them the connected capabilities. The first one is when it's insights-driven strategies and actions. It's insights-driven strategies and actions. You really must have that. And for you to be able to do that, you need data and you need the capability of analytics. So many organizations would have an insights or strategy function, but they actually don't use their data and their analytics capabilities the way they should. So when I say that there isn't anything new, yes, but it's an optimization of what people currently do. The second is, another capability is innovative products and services, and it derives very clearly and very strategically from the first point that I've made, which is insights-driven strategies and actions. The third is the experience centricity by design. And I like the discussions that we had on the first panel. you have to be intentional what experience you want your customers to have. And many times when you talk to our clients, yes, they say the customer is king, but they are not as intentional as they need to be to deliver on the promise that the customer expects. And beyond that, the customer can actually be the internal customer as well as the external customer. So the people that work with you and require service from you are actually your internal customers. And so the third point is really around experience centricity by design. The fourth is seamless interactions and commerce. The fifth is responsive operations and supply chain. This is where we're talking about the factory model. The sixth is aligned and empowered workforce. And when you talk about your aligned and empowered workforce, it seems like the regular HR, but it's a little different because when you're thinking about an empowered workforce, you should be thinking about a forward-looking organization. You should be thinking about a culture that fosters innovation. You should be thinking about employees that have the relevant skills, the digital skills to survive in this time and place. And the final, but most important, you should also be thinking about leadership as change agents, because they're the leaders in an organization that drive whatever change you see. So as I talk about some of these capabilities, you'd begin to see that they do exist, but what we're saying is that they need to exist at a higher level. So let me very quickly talk about the seventh and eighth capabilities that we think that organizations should begin to look at if they're looking to enhance their capabilities in digital transformation. I think the seventh one is digitally enabled technology architecture. This is where you're able to have secure architecture and technologies, and you're able to drive scale. You're able to scale up very easily. And the last is the integrated partner and alliance ecosystem, just being able to connect to the ecosystem that will make you quicker to the market and deliver faster to your customers. So I guess to answer your question, a summary is to say, yes, it doesn't seem like there is a lot of difference. It's just the optimization of what currently exists in the marketplace today.
Thank you so much, Ngozi. Optimization of what currently exists, capabilities that probably exist but not where they should be. You mentioned 8 of those. And I mean, the way I look at this is very much a journey, something as complicated as what you've just described. You talked about 8 capabilities, really have to be approached as a journey. And I guess some of our audience will really like to know how best to approach this journey. I'd like to come to you, Akeem and Megan. Are there foundational capabilities? And I guess probably you even see additional capabilities that bank needs to deploy from your experiences working with banks, working with financial services provider globally. Are there what you may consider foundational capabilities that sort of start off the journey before you start thinking about adding some other capabilities on top? Akeem, what's your considered view on this?
Thanks. So my view, I think the most foundational thing really is the knowledge worker, right? You need to build an enterprise or an organization of knowledgeable people about what we're talking about. And I'm starting all the way from leadership down to the guy who is at the front line dealing with customer issues. The reason why I say this is I have a fundamental philosophy that organizations run on the flow of information, right? So in order to be able to deliver value in any enterprise, the most important thing is to make sure that the right information gets to the right person or the right interface at the right time to enable the right decision or action to be taken. Yeah? To be able to do that, you kind of need to build every single building block that Ngozi has talked about, right? I don't think there is one piece that you can live without. You need to connect all of that. Now, fundamentally, foundationally, therefore, I think you need to start with the knowledge worker, build a workforce that is built of people who understand and know that this is important, building value interface with customers that delivers the customer experience that the customer needs so that you can build your business on the back of the customer. And I think that knowledge foundation is important. And then the second foundation will be how do you get information from the organization to the point of interaction to deliver that value in the most effective and efficient way.
Thank you, Akeem. Megan, you have walked across the globe pretty much, and I know you've seen different banks approach this journey in a different way. But what do you see across all the banks you've worked for that seems to be the basis for starting that journey? Are there foundational things that banks need to sort of pay attention to as they start this journey or continue from wherever they are on this journey?
Yep. Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. It's absolutely great to be back. Yeah, I think for me, it's having worked with lots of different banks of different kind of shapes and sizes and locations and at various points of their digital transformation journey. I think that it's important to know that each organization is different. And while there's certainly, foundations that can be applied to all banks, I think there's no true one-size-fits-all model. But I think some of the kind of core foundations I've seen that have really worked for banks, primarily within Europe, is having subject matter experts across the organization. So, employees that know to a very kind of knowledgeable extent things on, open banking, technology, customer experience, design thinking, and, incorporating those people into all sorts of meetings across various parts of the business. I think also having an environment where ideas can be tested internally and thinking and acting like a startup, and, encouraging product and tech and even, HR and legal teams, to think quickly and not be afraid to fail. That's certainly a foundation I've seen the likes of ING and Lloyds Bank and some of the other leaders here implement. And I think, definitely something that is foundational across any bank is engaging in customer testing early and often. I think what Ngozi said with, a lot of the large enterprises have these posters that say customer is king, but, when push comes to shove, it's, the needs of the business are always, prioritized over what the customer actually wants. For example, I'm working with a client at the moment and they're building something quite revolutionary in terms of payments, and I have joined 9 months into the project, working with one of the global leaders in technology, and they have not done one piece of customer testing yet. No validation, no discovery. I'm actually brought in to be the voice of the customer. And, I'm not entirely surprised because I still think that this is kind of the mindset of the enterprises, but I think, things can't change overnight. And, by perhaps picking 3 to 4, foundational tactics or mindsets, such as, subject matter experts, even internal hackathons or, competitions for customer-centric ideas, and then allowing those employees the time and space to actually build those and kind of thinking like a startup. I think that, those are good foundations and small steps to take in order to become, a truly customer-centric connected enterprise.
Thank you very much, Megan. I just want to, I think you touched on a number of important capabilities. I think something you said that's worthy of note is that, the context for different banks would certainly be different, and therefore the journey has to be approached in a way that sort of addresses those areas that, requires urgent attention, whether it's on innovation or around operations, or some of those other capabilities that Ngozi talked about earlier. I just want to touch on the point that Ngozi made earlier about, the capabilities. She mentioned responsive operations as one of those capabilities. But you are the CEO of a leading fintech in Nigeria, and operations is something that I believe you have a very good insight into, and how that has to be responsive. Can you tell us what are the imperatives for banks with regards to making operations as smart as it should be, operations that are led by data to make important and decisive operational decisions? Bode, over to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Tunji. Okay, so in terms of smart operations, I think what Ngozi and Akim said is like the foundation in terms of the people, having knowledgeable people to be able to anchor these things. One of the things that has really helped us is also taking a journey approach. And I know Megan mentioned startups quite a bit when she was talking. I think one of the key things is the agility of a startup to regroup and form teams. So we have operations, we have people that are very data driven. So everything we do is very data driven in operations. So for instance, when Nadi was talking, he talked about dispute resolution. There's one thing we say in payments, that payments is partnership. So for instance, if a customer, so we power payments for merchants, we power payments for customers. So when a customer, for instance, has a dispute, for instance, one of the things we found out that sometimes you take out, so everything, we try as much as possible to automate a lot of our processes, but we find out that as you work with the banks, as you work with the providers, as you work with the schemes, there are a number of things that bring in this manual intervention. So one thing that has worked is working very closely with the banks to see how we can quickly automate a lot of these things. So for instance, for the refund, we built a platform where when the bank sends us the files for the customers, the merchants can actually upload evidences, whether value was given, whether value was not given, because there's a 24-hour timeline for it to respond to a lot of these things. So automation helps. And then within operations itself, we have people that are data analysts. So they use data, so it's very intuitive. So the merchant can see it's self-service, so they can go on their dashboard, see the evidences that, okay, we gave value to this customer, we didn't give value to this customer, and that's, that is automated. So automation, data and analytics, and having that agile team. So the operations team doesn't work in silo. So we work with the engineering team. So if there are tools that we need to build overnight in terms of this is going to help us, somebody is working on Excel for 24 hours, what are the things that we can do to ensure that we bring this time to like 3 to 4 hours? So those are the things that we keep doing. We talk to our merchants a lot. We're always trying to find out what is the pain of the customer and how can we ensure that through the journey, we make this process as seamless and as efficient as possible.
Thank you very much, Bodhi. I think you started to touch on the very important topic of data and analytics there. I think just before I go on, I would like to encourage the audience to keep the question coming in. Also, in a short while, I'm going to take a quick poll. But I'd just like to sort of get more perspective on the point on data. I recently saw a quote that says, every business is a data business, which means businesses generate data in one form or the other, but not every business creates value with data. Megan, can you tell us from your perspective, why is this a challenge, given the proliferation of data, given the maturing capabilities we have around AI and machine learning? Why do you think that's a challenge, and what can businesses do to better leverage data to generate insights?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few challenges. So there's certainly the regulatory challenge, and specifically, here in Europe and parts of the States around, actually acquiring the data and how you can use that data. Even to the point where when you're trying to launch a new product or service that's focused around the extraction of data, so, whether that be something around personalization or contextualization, there's a lot of banks at the moment aren't really able to kind of create an experience that gets the customer on board and makes them feel comfortable. And I think a lot of this is down to banks don't know how to approach the idea of consents and how to position consents in a way that doesn't scare off the customer. So, with banks, there are a lot of strides in trying to do, cool and new and innovative things with data commercialization. But they're just not getting the traction and kind of excitement from customers. So I think there's kind of this consent and, GDPR and other types of regulation that make it a bit harder in other markets. I think also, there's, of course, while large banks have so much data. It's a matter of cleaning up that data and making it easily accessible within different divisions of banks and enterprises. And it's also, I think, creating this mindset amongst different divisions and departments and teams that, sharing data within the organization is a good thing. So for example, the retail division of a bank needs to give access to some data to the corporate part of a bank. Are they in competition with each other? Do they have this mindset of, everything we're doing is for the good of the bank? Everyone has their own KPIs and priorities. So really just kind of making this idea of data sharing and striving to be a data-driven enterprise, definitely one amongst within the organization. This can go back to, being one of the foundations or a pillar in the organization. So I was working with a bank in Scandinavia on the data commercialization team, and every month we had committee meetings in which we had representatives from all different parts of the business, and we would, share our experiences with launching different POCs and trends and, what other banks were doing. And then, those representatives would then disseminate the knowledge and, what other parts of the businesses were working on from a data commercialization perspective to their respective teams. So, it was a small thing, but it really helped in kind of, disseminating this mindset across the business and making, different initiatives more transparent and getting everyone on board to, have this mindset that we're all in this together. And, let's help each other out. And, the more data we can pull together and the more we can streamline the processes, the better it's going to be for the business and for the customer.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Megan. I'd just like to take the poll at this point. We have the poll up now. Which of these capabilities do you feel your organization should prioritize for investment over the next 12 to 24 months? I think you can select as many as 3. We'd like to get your views. This for audience to respond to. But while we get that going, Akeem, the last video we saw, which really sort of provided context to this session, was talking about how technology-enabled, digitally enabled technology architecture is a backbone for the customer experience that we want to create on the front. Can you tell us some of those components of the elements of the architecture that banks need to begin to look at to make sure that the architecture of that technology platform is such that enables what is required from a customer experience perspective?
Yeah, sure, I can. And I think the philosophy to use to think about it is something that Megan kind of referred to around data and data sharing and how data is used. Somewhere in the prep for this session, I think KPMG had said that data is the new oil, right? But if you think about it, you don't put oil in your car, right? So if data is the new oil, my view is that user experience is actually the petrol, is the refinement of the data that you have to create the right user experience that actually fuels the business and allows it to grow. So the first component I would think about really is how banks implement their data strategy. Again, someone had talked earlier about trying to take a loan from one of the bank apps. And I've had that experience, right? I'm trying to take a loan from a bank and the loan is offering me 5,000. But somewhere in that bank, someone knows my salary, right? They have that information about me, but yet the information that they have available at the point where I'm trying to take a loan only allows them to offer me 5,000 naira. So it's really important to build the right data strategy and the right data architecture to ensure that you can get the right data to the right people at the right time, like I said, to make the right actions or decisions. So that's kind of like the first thing. The second piece, I think, really is around, again, starting from the front end, is what I like to describe as adaptive user interfaces, right? Again, we talk about making the customer the most important, or making customer-centric decisions or user interfaces. But one assumption that we almost seem to all make is to assume that all customers are the same, or all customers expect the same thing, right? So one of the technologies that I'm encouraging banks and indeed every organization to think about is how do you create an adaptive user interface where what is most important to your customer is what is available to that customer, rather than a whole suite of features and functionality that is completely useless to that customer and just seems to clutter the customer's experience. And this goes into thinking about marketing and whatever else is the customer interaction that you're thinking about. Then in terms of the backbone itself, I think there are a number of new technologies that allow us to do things a little bit differently. The concept of microservices, being able to build a service in one part of the organization and reuse it in another part of the organization without having to make significant technology changes, I think is really important. I think there are a number of repetitive tasks that if you do a little bit faster, a little bit better, you can eliminate a lot of the friction that customers experience at the point of interaction. But it talked about automation. I would even go as far as saying robotics process automation, to take some of those mundane daily tasks and automating them and allowing a bot to deal with those so that your customers get a much better experience and your staff are freed up to actually do knowledge work. And then maybe the concept of decentralized databases. One of the things that we find, and I think we'll probably talk about this a little bit more later, is that connected organizations or connected enterprises is not just about your organization alone, right? Building the right ways to interface with all the people that supply information to you so that you can deliver the right customer experience is extremely crucial. And your technology platform must allow those kind of interactions to happen, not only within your organization, but external to your organization as well. And one of the things that we find, and which will probably be my last point on this, is really around fraud. Yeah? A lot of the controls that you find, a lot of the regulation that you find, a lot of the risk processes that you have today in most organizations built around people, right? It's built around manual processes. And they're there for a reason. If you are going to build a connected enterprise and you are going to try and create an organization where information flow and data flow is seamless, you need to build the right tools in the right places to deal with the risk and compliance requirements that requires you to stay afloat as a business. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Akeem. Very useful. Can we see the result of the poll? I'd like to see what the audience think is really critical and important to the digital transformation agenda. And I think while we switch to that, Ngozi, I really just want to come quickly to you. From what all we've heard and all that's been said, it seems to me like we have pillars for this that needs to really sort of come together to achieve this digital transformation objectives. And I put these pillars into three different categories: technology, you have culture, people, and all related to the people agenda. You also have strategy, and businesses have always sort of been strategic in the way they approach their play. Can you tell me from your perspective, which one of these three components do you think is more important as we approach the play for digital transformation? And also looking at the result from the poll, are you surprised by any of the things coming up? We are seeing a lot of the people tilt towards experience centricity by design, innovative product. I think that's about 44 and 41% respectively. Are you surprised by that in any way, Ngozi?
Well, to me, polls never surprise me. The outcome that you get from a poll would really be the state of life of the person that's filling the poll, and I'm also going to use that thinking to sort of answer your question. You've segmented the pillars into technology, and they're broad segments. I think they're more than that, into technology, into culture and people, and into strategy. I think perhaps we have more segments than that. But I guess my answer to it would be that people would reach out to you. And I think the message I want to use this discussion to sort of bed down is that if you're looking at digital transformation, it makes a lot of sense to look at it from a comprehensive manner, and which Connected Enterprise helps you do. If you do a simple digital maturity assessment, it tells you where you are on all the major pillars. What we find is that people use intuition. So perhaps if you're talking to an HR director, he or she would anchor the discussion from a culture and people perspective. How do I get my people to be digitally savvy? How do I get them to use the technologies that we have implemented? By the way, people will only use technologies implemented if it helps their work. So if you've implemented something without the perspective of the employer or the user, they would bypass it. And so an HR director would look at it from that perspective. A chief digital officer or a technology person would look at digital transformation from a technology perspective. What technologies do I need to implement? What apps do I need to build out so that people would engage? A strategy officer would look at it, perhaps the MD will also look at it from a strategic perspective, to say, okay, how do I get my company to the 21st century? How do I become more how am I able to respond to the changes that I'm seeing in the market? So depending on who it is you're talking to, the person will look at it from his area of bias. I think the thing I want us to take away from this discussion is that if you want to do a good job, if you want to really transition yourself on a digital transformation journey, you actually have to start by looking at your organization as a tabula rasa, doing the digital assessment that's required so that you know where you're further ahead and where you're behind. And then with that, you can now prioritize what you want to focus on. So it's not an easy answer to say it's technology or culture or people or even how you interact with vendors and how you open up your system so that external third parties can connect. It's beyond that. It's really looking at your organization as a blank slate and doing the assessment that tells you where you are so that you can now decide how you want to prioritize your journey. That would be my advice, and that advice is obviously I'm a consultant. That's how we use a framework to answer most questions.
Thank you very much, Ngozi.
Can I jump in quickly?
All right, go ahead, Ngozi.
Is that okay? Sorry, it's Megan here.
Hi, Megan. Please go ahead.
I just wanted to say I'm not surprised, but I am a bit disappointed that aligned and empowered workforce is at the bottom of this. I think this is something that's hugely underrated. I think it's quite easy, to get excited about innovative products and services. But I think, what Ngozi said about the people, tech, and processes, I think even if you have, the best designers, the best tech, unless you have the right people and processes behind it, I don't think you will have a successful digital transformation. And I think that's kind of any size business, and just kind of something that's quite relevant to what's happening in Europe, specifically Germany and Berlin. N26, one of the leading European and soon to be global challenger banks, they're having a lot of issues between the management and the employees. There's a huge issue around the employees want to set up a works council. They have such a high turnover rate amongst employees, and I'm an N26 customer, and I can see that these unhappy employees and this lack of processes and investment in people over the past year has been translating into what the actual product looks like. So I just wanted to say, while this is at the bottom, I think it's worth kind of, considering, is this something that we should be thinking about more? Because I think without this empowered workforce, you can't get to innovative products and services and really implementing a culture where you have centricity by design.
Very insightful, Megan. I think that point you're making there sort of ties to the question that Stella is asking. So the point around banks not really leveraging the partnership agenda as well as they could. So I'm going to read the question, and I'm going to be looking to Akim to provide response to this question. Banks tend to be more dependent on internally available and generated customer data to inform their innovation, with limited effort at pulling data and insight from external sources outside of the bank and banking system. Outside of competitor insight and outsourcing research, what other avenues can banks use to harness access to a broader data set from the market? Akim.
Yeah, I think this is a I think Stella has touched on a real problem that exists in this market, probably in any other market, right? And I would argue that it's one of the reasons why the regulators came up with things like GDPR and NDPR to make information sharing and information access a little bit easier and more streamlined. So I think the first part of the answer for me would be organizations need to think about NDPR and GDPR not as restrictions, but as enablers, right? It gives you the ability to use the same set of rules and guidelines to get access to information that is held by someone else, yeah? I think that's probably the first part of the answer. The second part of the answer is organizations typically share information, right? One of the things we found, because I basically champion the data strategy for InterSwitch, is that we tend to have a lot more information than we think we do as an organization, right? And there's a lot of publicly available information that we don't tap into. So one of the challenges, and I think it's probably the first place to start as an organization, is to start thinking about where is this information or where is this piece of data within my organization, yeah? And see if you can make that available. The next step will then be which of my partners are willing to share the information with you and what kind of data sharing agreements can we come to, of course, within compliance of the existing regulations, and then doing those partnerships so you can do data sharing. So for example, InterSwitch is currently doing some kind of data sharing agreements with people who want to do loans, people who are trying to build customer dashboards and insights to better build their products. And we're doing that, giving us access to both partners' data, but also importantly, building that better product of that better customer experience by sharing data. And I think these are the two immediate points or steps that you can take to get access to external data.
Thank you very much, Akim. Very useful. I think the topic of partnership is generating some buzz amongst the audience. There's another question around partnership, which I'd like Bode to tackle. From Asafat. From a partnership point of view, what can be done when failure is coming from the partners that negatively affects customer experience, especially where there's no alternative? She mentioned like Akim's team in cash transaction. So I think the point there is what can be done when you partner with a fintech, or as a fintech you partner with a bank, and the customer experience issues is really coming from your partner. What can be done? Practical examples that you've seen maybe your organization adopted or other players adopted to tackle this kind of challenge.
All right, thanks, Sunji. In fact, I have a very live example. So last week or 2 weeks ago, when customers do transactions, they see our names on the receipts. But there was an issue in the industry where a lot of the banks that we partner with, they have third-party providers that are helping them in processing files and all of that. So there was a breakdown in all of that. And when that happens, so you can imagine there are a lot of people that are involved. Us as the payments processor, there's the acquiring bank, there's the third party to the acquiring bank, and then there's the issuing bank. That's the bank of the customers. So you know, there's always, in this digital age, there's always outcry across the channels, it's on social media. So I think one of the things that we have tried to do in the past 3 months is communication. So there are a number of things that we've done. So internal communication. So when something breaks, we have a system where we report a lot of these things internally, because you can't scale what people don't understand. So when people internally understand what's happening, it's one of the key things. And then the other thing that we also focused on is customer education. I think it was Ladi that mentioned it. We have a very active product marketing and storytelling team. It's not something that you can ignore, especially in fintech, who tell your stories, because people are just like, oh, Flutterwave is down again. They have that issue. Failures have started, but you know there are NDAs to which you have with all these parties as well. So how do you manage that? So education in terms of explaining how even payment works. But you know, customers are not really interested in that. They just want to come, do their transactions and go. So a lot of education in terms of how payment works, a lot of blog posts. That's why you see a lot of fintechs doing videos in terms of this is how it happens. And then on the support side as well, somebody has said not one size fits all. So for instance, for a lot of our big enterprises, we have people that we call technical account managers. So these people are technical, they're engineers, but they also support people. So if anything happens, they're able to troubleshoot and explain to the merchant. So big merchants like the Ubers, the Netflix, they have people managing those accounts. Then on the support bit as well, providing the customer with enough information. So part of what we've done practically is like build a dispute tool. So if you did a transaction maybe August 2nd and you're just getting the debits on the 21st, you're wondering, you know, you did the transaction, but you can't remember because, you know, time has passed. So we built a tool where once you put in the references, it will remind you that, wow, you did this transaction, because, you know, that also helps. Akim talked about intuitiveness in terms of user experience. So if a user comes to your app or your platform, they already know what to do. You're giving them enough information. If something breaks, you're also giving them a timeline. You know, they just want you to communicate and explain when that happens. They want to know when it will be resolved. So a lot of all these things, FAQs, ensuring that all your channels are active, using data to also know when your peak period is so that you can shuffle people around. So a lot of those things, I think customer education is one of the key things that I had said. And then also finding ways to ensure that, you know, like the consumer protection. So if something happens, you know, who do they go to? How do they navigate? Do they have all of those information? I think that those are some of the critical things. And if you're on one level of digitization and you're depending on your partners, it doesn't mean that the partner is also on that level as well. So we've seen that working with a lot of those partners too has helped to also upgrade their the level of how they think about digital and how we offer these services to customers as well.
Thank you very much, Bode. I think on this note, I would like to say a very big thank you to all my panelists this morning for sharing rich domain insight on the topic of connected enterprise and how businesses need to pay attention, not just to the front end where that touches the customer directly, but also to all the different elements of the enterprise that enable the rich customer experience that is sought after. Thank you very much.